I'm at Northern State University here in Aberdeen, South Dakota, trying to find Seymour Hall because that is where they found Morgan Lewis's body outside of his office. The German professor, he was shot in the back of the head, and somehow they still figured it most likely a suicide. Although it had never really been ruled a suicide, it's deemed suspicious. On the early morning of November 1st, 2004, a janitor working at Northern State University in Aberdeen, South Dakota, was passing by Seymour Hall whenever he came upon a sight that would shock not only the school, but the entire town of Aberdeen. Laying in a pool of blood, the new German professor, Morgan Lewis, was sprawled out in front of the doors of the building. Lewis had what was initially reported to be a gunshot wound to the back of the head. Now, Morgan Lewis was originally from California, and he had actually moved to South Dakota to work at NSU. But while he was here, he also got a job working at the local high school, as well as a Hutterite colony. And while at NSU, he was asked to take on a few other subjects. Now, going over interviews with people who worked with Lewis in the short time that he was in Aberdeen, everybody described him as a good guy who was very smart and a very hard worker. But now back to November 1st, 2004, after the body was discovered and the police came, they got right to work trying to figure out exactly what they were dealing with. They knew that they had a body with a gunshot wound to the back of the head, and after some searching, they would come upon an older .25 caliber handgun found in a dumpster that was roughly 40 feet from where the body was discovered. Now, the gun turned out to be unregistered, making it very hard to figure out who owned the gun. They dusted for prints, but were unable to find any. It was almost as if the gun had been wiped clean before it was thrown in that dumpster. The police discovered Lewis's wallet near the body, and it was noted that there was no money in it. Later, they would find his backpack inside of Seymour Hall, which had the keys to the building, his keys to his car, and as well as some loose cash. It was also noted that Morgan Lewis had on a white t-shirt and that his jacket was inside Seymour Hall with his backpack, which is very strange because it's January, it's the Midwest, and it gets very cold. I did a quick search and found out that it was around 25 degrees. After the body was examined by the coroner, the death was ruled a homicide, and word got out to the school, which didn't take long, for panic to sweep across the entire town. People were scared. They believed they had a killer on the loose, and worse, the police had no idea who it was. One person who was interviewed was a junior at NSU named Deb Kavanaugh, and she said, at the time it was going on, you didn't know if it was somebody who lived next to you who killed Lewis, or what was going on with it. I actually drove across the street just to go to school instead of walking, and I lived right across the street. The police did bring in other agencies to help look into this case, and the chief of police, Don Lanfer, said, "I fully believe that this is solvable. It's just a matter of time. We'll follow the leads and use all of our resources."
One eternity later.
Over 2 years later, on February 2nd, Lanfer called for a press meeting at the Johnson Fine Arts Center, where he dropped a bombshell of a conclusion for this case. The APD, as well as other agencies working on the case, have come to the conclusion that the man, Morgan Lewis, found outside in the cold with no jacket, no money in his wallet, and a gunshot wound to either the back of the head or neck, was self-inflicted. The ruling by the coroner that it was originally a homicide was changed to suicide, and Lanfer declined to answer any questions, but he left them with this. Through the interview process, we have discovered things that pointed to suicide. Now, obviously, this came as a shock to a lot of people in the town, and a lot of people were not happy with this ruling. They wanted more answers, but due to some kind of a law here in South Dakota, the police didn't have to give out any more information than that. How did nobody hear the gunshot? And how in the hell do you get shot in the back of the head, or in the head in general, and the gun is found in a dumpster, and they rule that a possible suicide? The gun was wiped clean, found in a dumpster, nowhere near the body, suicide. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, the reason they thought it was a suicide was that he was supposedly in debt, and he was trying to get the insurance money for his family. I don't know. It's all very, very suspicious. Now, going over the more updated report, at some time before 5:30 a.m., Morgan Lewis went outside of Seymour Hall with a white shirt on and and no jacket, leaving his personal items, including his backpack, his keys to the building, and his keys to the car inside of the building. He then walked over to the dumpster, holding a .25 caliber gun in his left hand. He placed it to his neck and pulled the trigger. The low caliber bullet passed through his neck, severing his carotid artery. He then tossed the gun that had no fingerprints on it into the dumpster before walking the additional 40 feet, where he collapsed due to blood loss outside of Seymour Hall. The updated report also said that he had gunshot residue on both of his hands, as well as blood splatter on his hands, and there was a clear trail of blood leading from the body to the dumpster. Now, obviously, there are some differences between the initial report and the more updated report. The first and most shocking is the change that Morgan had a gunshot wound to the back of his head is now in the front of the neck, as well as the never before mentioned blood trail that led to the dumpster where the gun was found and the GSR that was found on the body. Lewis had 2 life insurance policies out on himself, the beneficiary of which was a man he had a long-term relationship with named James Buck. Now, as you know, whenever a death is ruled a suicide, insurance companies will not pay. But James Buck took the insurance companies to court over the sum of $150,000, and eventually they settled outside of court for an undisclosed amount. Now, this is where things get even more strange, because I read an interview with a man named Todd Epp. Epp is a journalist, and he said that he received this letter from an APD officer, badge number 264. And it reads, "Let me tell you from actually working on the case that it leaves very little doubt that this was in fact a murder. Even the coroner ruled it a homicide. A suspect had motive and knew the facts of the case that were never released to the public. I read the report. I worked the case. I dealt with the suspect. I, like many other officers, still feel that it was a murder, not suicide. But 2 murders on NSU would look bad in the press, and enrollment would drop. A suicide and an accidental death look a lot better to prospective college students, rather than 2 murders and no arrests." Now, I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking the exact same thing when I first read it. What does he mean, 2 murders and no arrests? And for that, we have to go back 18 months to May 3rd, 2003, whenever the body of college student Tyler O'Neill was discovered outside of Geordie Hall. O'Neill was a student at NSU. He was studying criminal justice, and this case also has some strange things to mention. First of which, it was reported that O'Neill's body was found outside of Geordie Hall. But NSU students who were interviewed said that O'Neill's body was discovered by another student inside the lobby of Geordie Hall at around 9:45 a.m. He was propped up in a chair, he had no shoes, no socks on, and severe head and other bodily injuries. And it turned out that he didn't even live in Geordie Hall. O'Neill's father was very upset, and which is understandable. It appeared that his son had been beaten to death, and the school had no security footage of any kind, because they had no security cameras that could help shed light on who was responsible. And let's say that this was an accidental death. His body was propped up in a chair. That means somebody had to have put him there. That somebody could have taken him to the ER. They could have called 911, but they didn't. To me, that means that someone is responsible for his death. O'Neill's father also made a point to state that after 18 months after his son's death, we have another death on campus, and the school had still not set up any kind of security cameras. Now, O'Neill's death did have a prime suspect, and a grand jury was looking at him for a second-degree murder charge, but that was before the forensic pathologist changed the cause of death from homicide to an accidental death, which led to all charges being dropped, and his case to this point is still ruled unsolved. 2004, this was Seymour Hall. Now, Kramer Hall, his body was laying out here. They found him in the morning. Got a football arena right there. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, this is where it happened. Craziness. Now, I want to point out that both Geordie Hall and Seymour Hall have been demolished, and in one report, somebody stated that Seymour Hall is no longer there to serve as a reminder of the death that took place there. So I wanted to point out that Morgan Lewis was a gay man from California who moved to the Midwest to teach, and authorities believe that he, a guy from California, emptied all of his belongings into his backpack, went out into the freezing cold temperatures without a jacket, took out an unregistered gun, shot himself, wiped the gun clean, threw it into a dumpster, proceeded to walk an additional 40 feet before dying of blood loss, all because he was stressed and some other undisclosed reasons that they will not tell us. Now, I want to point out that I am not an internet sleuth, and I do not claim to know what happened in this unsolved case as well as any other unsolved cases I've ever looked into. But I do have a theory that makes a little bit more sense to me, and I'm not saying that this is what happened, I'm just saying that this kind of makes a little bit more sense. Somebody else found Morgan Lewis that morning in the building. They held him at gunpoint, and they led him outside, not letting him grab his jacket, his keys to the building, or to his car. That way he cannot get back in the building. This person could have instructed Morgan Lewis to give him all of his money, hence why the wallet that was found near the body had no money in it. After robbing Lewis, he could have decided to shoot him, that way he would not be able to identify him. The blood trail would still lead to the dumpster where the robbery took place, as well as where the assailant then wiped his fingerprints from the gun and tossed it in the dumpster. But why would he wipe the gun instead of just taking it with him? It's an unregistered gun that was just used to shoot someone. It's way better for them to find an unregistered gun with no fingerprints and no way to trace it to them than rather being found with the murder weapon on their body. The town wanted answers, and a suicide would look better than no answers at all. And yes, I know that does seem reminiscent of the letter that Tom Epp supposedly got from that police officer, which I want to point out, Epp himself said that he never actually was able to confirm that the letter did come from a police officer. So it is possible that that letter was just sent to mess with some reporter, for whichever reason someone would want to do that. Before I end this video, I just wanted to point out to you guys that I did look on YouTube for other videos of people covering this, as well as podcast episodes, because I kind of wanted to get an idea of what other people thought about the case. And I didn't find even one. And it seems like as time went by, this case just seemed to disappear. Or maybe it was somebody's intent to make it go away. But like I said, it's kind of weird. This is now April 2024, and I haven't found anybody else talking about this. All this is just reports online that I wanted to put into a video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. But let me know what you think. Have you ever heard of this case before? Could this be a conspiracy by the school and local authorities to cover up the murders that happened on campus? If you really enjoyed this video and you have not already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you really want to help me out, share this video, because it's the best way to help the channel grow. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next one.